Hello and welcome to AFM 451. The objective of this video is to sharpen how you think about audit evidence and what it means in practice to have sufficient and appropriate evidence to support an audit opinion. Let's start with the basic definition. Audit evidence is any information that the auditor uses to reach conclusions. Not just what's inside the accounting records. It also includes system reports, source documents, third-party confirmations, observations, recalculations, analytics, and an inquiry corroborated by more persuasive evidence. In other words, audit evidence is the foundation of audit quality because our opinion is only as defensible as the evidence trail behind it. Canadian auditing standards then tighten the objective. You design and perform procedures to obtain sufficient and appropriate evidence so you can draw reasonable conclusion. Sufficient and appropriate are not nice to have words. They are the standard we are judged against if the audit is ever challenged. Sufficiency is about quantity. It's about how much evidence we need to reduce detection risk to an acceptably low level. More evidence is not automatically better. If the risk is low and evidence is high quality, you may not need as much. If the risk is high, you need more and you need to make sure it is more persuasive. Appropriateness, on the other hand, is quality, relevance, and reliability. Relevance means it speaks to the assertion you are testing. Reliability depends on the source and how it was generated. Independent evidence is typically more reliable than internally produced evidence, and internally produced evidence becomes more reliable when controls over its preparation are strong, robust, consistently designed, and effectively operating. Here's a practical example. Suppose you're auditing a retailer's year-end revenues and you identify elevated cutoff risk because of heavy returns, discounts, and aggressive sales incentives towards the year-end. Management gives you a clean internal sales report and says revenues are fine. That report might be relevant, but it's not persuasive on its own. Appropriate evidence would now include a targeted sample of shipping documents around year-end, third-party carrier tracking data, credit note patterns after year-end, and of course cash receipt timings. If you can reconcile those independent points back to the recorded revenues and returns, you have evidence that is both of high quality and more directly tied to the cutoff and existence assertion. The higher the risk, the more of that work you need, and the less you can accept management's narrative. Now let's move on to the logic into the sufficient and appropriate evidence. Now, accounts audit risk equals inherent risk times control risk times detection risk. We do not need to rewrite intrinsic risk, and we do not need to control the client's control risk in real time. We should not be doing that because of independence. The lever we actually pull is the detection risk, and we pull it by changing the nature, timing, and extent of our audit procedures. Lower detection risk means more work and more persuasive work. Before we sign, we must conclude that sufficient and appropriate evidence has been obtained for all material assertions. This is not a vague overall feeling that we did enough. It is assertion by assertion. Existence, completeness, valuation, rights and obligations, presentation, cutoff. Weakness in one material assertion can undermine the opinion even if everything else looks fine. And of course, if sufficient and appropriate evidence is not obtained for material assertion, we try to get more evidence. This includes expanded sample size, changing the procedures, moving to more independent sources, or even redesigning tests to be more directly responsive to the risks. If we still cannot obtain sufficient and appropriate evidence, there is a scope limitation. And we have to consider a modified or an unclean opinion because we cannot claim reasonable assurance without the evidence to support it. Sufficient and appropriate evidence is what turns audit work into audit assurance. Every judgment we make about risks and controls and assertions ultimately collapses into a single question. Is the evidence strong enough to support the opinion we're about to sign off on? When that link is weak, audit quality fails, regardless of how well the work was performed. Thanks for following along. Take care, stay safe, and bye for now.